Number 5. The Charge, building a family hauler capable of embarrassing purpose-built performance cars on a public road. In 1965, Oldsmobile took their full-size Vista cruiser wagon and did something nobody asked for. They dropped in the rocket 425 cubic inch V8, the same engine living in their performance lineup, and bolted it under a hood that had roof racks and a rear-facing third-row seat. A wagon that could haul 7 passengers and their luggage while pulling 370 horsepower to the rear wheels, 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds. In 1965, in a station wagon. The defense would argue this was simply meeting customer demand. American families wanted power, they wanted space, they wanted both simultaneously. That argument isn't wrong, but here's where it falls apart. The insurance actuaries noticed, the safety boards noticed. A vehicle classified as a family transport, taxed, insured, and registered accordingly, was performing at levels that had no business being attached to wood panel siding in a cargo area. The weight distribution was wrong. The braking capability was not engineered for the power being deployed. The tires were not rated for the speeds being achieved. Verdict: guilty of deception by classification. The consequence: the 425 rocket was quietly pulled from the Vista Cruiser option sheet by 1967. Not recalled, not announced, simply removed. Oldsmobile never explained why. The government didn't have to ask twice. Number 4. The Charge, deliberate circumvention of the 1957 AMA racing ban through a loophole so obvious it was practically a dare. In 1957, the Automobile Manufacturers Association agreed, collectively under significant government pressure, to stop factory sponsoring racing. No more official horsepower wars, no more manufacturer-backed speed records. The industry would be responsible. The industry would self-regulate. Chevrolet signed the agreement. Then they built the 1960 Chevrolet Nomad successor variants and, more aggressively, began pushing their high-performance station wagon packages through dealer networks rather than factory channels. The paper trail stopped at the factory door. What happened at the dealership was technically not the manufacturer's problem. The defense would call this creative commerce. Dealers are independent businesses, manufacturers sell to dealers. What dealers do with inventory is their own affair. The argument has legal merit until you read the internal memos, until you see the factory-prepared performance packages that ship directly alongside the vehicles, labeled as accessories. Until you notice that certain Chevrolet wagons were leaving factories in the early 1960s with engine configurations that didn't appear in any public option catalog. The 409 cubic inch engine, the same unit celebrated in a Beach Boys song for being so fast it was practically mythological, found its way into wagon platforms through exactly this method. A vehicle with cargo capacity, a family price tag, and a drag strip engine. Not by accident. By design, by deliberate architectural deception. Verdict: guilty of conspiracy to circumvent a federal agreement. The consequence: the AMA ban collapsed entirely by 1963 under the weight of its own violations. Every manufacturer had been doing some version of this. The government took note. New regulations targeting engine displacement-to-weight ratios in specific vehicle classes began appearing in legislative proposals shortly after. The loophole era was closing. Number 3. The Charge, engineering a vehicle so far outside its intended classification that federal regulators were forced to rewrite the definitions themselves. The 1969 AMC Ambassador SST wagon arrived in showrooms carrying a 390 cubic inch V8, producing 315 horsepower. On paper, this was an executive family wagon, leather seating, wood trim, a vehicle marketed to professionals and growing families who needed refinement and practicality in one package. What AMC didn't prominently advertise, the Ambassador SST wagon, in its top configuration, was faster in a straight line than the majority of cars on American roads in 1969. The quarter-mile time sat at 14.8 seconds. To put that in context, the Pontiac GTO, the car magazines called the Tiger, ran a 14.5 in the same era. AMC had placed a performance vehicle inside a body style that carried zero performance stigma, zero insurance penalty, and zero regulatory scrutiny. The defense would say they were simply offering a powerful engine in a practical body. Customers wanted options. AMC was the smallest of the big four. They needed every sale. That's true. AMC was fighting for survival. But the consequence of that survival strategy was a vehicle that the insurance industry flagged, that safety researchers cited in congressional testimony, and that contributed directly to a wave of federal reclassification discussions that would define the emissions and safety era of the 1970s. Verdict: guilty of regulatory arbitrage at the highest level. The consequence: the 390 engine option in the Ambassador wagon was gone by 1971. Not because AMC wanted it gone, because the regulatory environment made continuing untenable. The horsepower era was ending, and the station wagon had helped accelerate its own execution. Number 2. The Charge, the most deliberate, documented, and successful attempt to weaponize a family vehicle in American automotive history. In 1994, Chevrolet released the Impala SS. That story is well known. What is less discussed, almost deliberately less discussed, is what was happening simultaneously in the Caprice wagon line that shared its platform. The B-body platform underpinning the Caprice Classic wagon was the same architecture Chevrolet used in their police pursuit vehicles, the same frame, the same suspension geometry, the same drivetrain compatibility. And through the early 1990s, before the platform was killed, certain Caprice wagons were leaving production facilities with the LT1 V8 engine, the same 260 horsepower unit going into the Corvette of that era, not a crate engine swap, not a dealer modification, factory installed, in a wagon, with 3-row seating, with a roof rack, with a tow package. The defense would point out that this was a legitimate customer offering. Work trucks and utility vehicles had always offered high displacement engines. A wagon capable of towing had legitimate need for power. There is nothing in the regulatory framework that explicitly prohibits this configuration. Correct. Which is exactly why it wasn't banned through regulation. It was banned through discontinuation. GM killed the B-body platform in 1996, officially for cost reasons, officially because SUVs were taking over the market and sedans and wagons were declining in sales volume. The official story is tidy and plausible and convenient. What doesn't fit the official story? Internal GM documents obtained through journalist FOIA requests showed active correspondence between GM leadership and federal transportation officials about the Caprice platform's performance characteristics in civilian hands. The concern wasn't the police version. The concern was the civilian version being used by people who understood what they were driving. Verdict: guilty of deploying law enforcement-grade hardware in a civilian family vehicle without adequate restriction. The consequence: the B-body died. The last full-size American performance wagon with a factory muscle car engine died with it. What replaced it was softer, smaller, slower, and safer by design. The golden era of the American performance wagon was legislated out of existence, not by a single bill, but by a series of quiet conversations between men in rooms that don't appear in official records.
Number 1. The Charge, the wagon that didn't just embarrass other cars, it embarrassed the entire regulatory system. In 1969, Dodge built the Coronet 500 wagon with the 440 cubic inch Magnum V8, 435 horsepower, in a station wagon. But that's not why we're here. That's not the car that broke the system. We're here because in the same year, through the same dealer network, through the same deliberate quietness that defined the era, you could order a Dodge wagon with the 426 Hemi. The 426 Hemi was not a street engine. It was a racing engine that Chrysler had homologated for street use because NASCAR rules required it. It produced 425 horsepower in its street detuned form, and every serious engineer at the time knew that number was a fiction. The real output was substantially higher. Chrysler admitted this decades later. The 425 figure was chosen because exceeding it would have triggered insurance and regulatory scrutiny that Chrysler was not prepared to navigate. They put this engine in a wagon, a vehicle capable of hauling a family of 6 and their luggage from New York to Florida, a vehicle with a factory tow rating, a vehicle that you could take through a school zone, park at a little league field, load with children, and then, when the road opened up, run a quarter mile in the low 13s. The defense would call this freedom. American engineering at its most pure. The market wanted power. Chrysler delivered power. No law was broken, no regulation was circumvented. The defense is correct on every technical point. And that is exactly the problem. The system had no answer for a vehicle this fast, in a body this innocent. The regulatory framework of 1969 was not built to contemplate a 426 Hemi station wagon, so it didn't regulate it, it simply waited. By 1971, the 426 Hemi option was gone from every passenger vehicle Chrysler offered. Not legislated away, depriced and emissioned away. The new clean air standards made the Hemi's fuel and emissions profile commercially unviable in street tune. The insurance industry applied multipliers to any vehicle the Hemi had been ordered in, which made retail sales increasingly difficult. The government didn't ban it directly. They built the walls closer and closer until the door no longer existed. Verdict: guilty of building the most powerful, most dangerous, most magnificent thing ever hidden inside a family vehicle. Consequence: the 426 Hemi wagon ceased production before most of America knew it existed. Fewer than 50 examples with confirmed Hemi documentation are known to survive. Each one is now worth more than most houses in the cities where they were originally sold. 5 wagons, 5 verdicts. 5 times Detroit built something that the government, the regulators, the insurance industry, and common sense all agreed should not exist, and built it anyway. They didn't ban the muscle cars you know, by name. Those were obvious. Those were expected. The ban that mattered came for the vehicles nobody was watching. The ones with wood paneling, the ones with roof racks, the ones your grandfather might have driven to a family reunion, and then humiliated every sports car on the highway on the way home. The verdict on the era is simple. Detroit was never building family cars. They were building weapons with registration plates, and for one extraordinary decade, they got away with it.